Hong Kong has over 100 MTR stations. Multiple lines weave through the entire city, keeping everyday life moving for millions of residents. For nearly half a century, the system has run smoothly, one of the most essential parts of Hong Kong's transportation network. But for decades, beneath the streets where trains rush by, one eerie legend after another has quietly spread. Some claim they saw a mysterious figure at a certain station. Others swear that inside the MTR, they somehow stepped into a parallel world.
Just how strange can these stories get? Today, let's follow Hong Kong's rail lines and trace the tracks of those urban legends that once shocked the city.
In the 1960s, Hong Kong's economy was booming. The population kept rising, and the streets grew more crowded by the day. To ease the pressure on surface traffic, building an underground rail system became urgent. Plans were drawn up in 9 phases, an MTR project totaling 50 kilometers. And from that moment on, strange stories began to spread, quietly, one after another.
In October 1979, the MTR's first line, the Kwun Tong Line, officially began service, marking Hong Kong's entrance into the MTR era. 2 months later, the line extended further south and added a crucial station, Yau Ma Tei. When the Tsuen Wan Line later opened, Yau Ma Tei became an interchange station between the Kwun Tong Line and the Tsuen Wan Line. And it was here that one of the most vivid urban legends in MTR history took place.
It was Tuesday, November 10, 1981. Yau Ma Tei Station was packed, with an endless stream of passengers transferring between lines. Back then, MTR platforms had no platform screen doors. If you stood too close, there was a real risk of falling onto the tracks. So people were expected to queue in an orderly line behind a safe distance, waiting for the train to arrive.
At 1:30 p.m., a Tsuen Wan Line train departed Central Station and headed north. The carriages were filled with passengers. The driver operated the train smoothly, just as usual, passing station after station, until it was about to reach Yau Ma Tei.
That was when something happened. The moment the front of the train entered the platform area, the driver thought he saw a figure flash across his vision. Then, suddenly, someone appeared on the tracks. At the same time, passengers on the platform witnessed it too, and people began shouting for the train to stop. The driver slammed the emergency brakes, but the train still slid forward a short distance before finally coming to a halt.
The driver could clearly sense something was wrong, something unnatural, and a wave of unease washed over him. Once the train was fully stopped, he immediately reported the situation. All passengers were then evacuated from the train, and Yau Ma Tei Station fell into brief chaos. Before long, police and firefighters arrived at the scene. Besides the driver, multiple passengers on the platform also insisted they had seen someone into the track area. According to them, it was a schoolgirl wearing a white uniform who, in full view of everyone, suddenly appeared on the tracks. Most people believed she had likely been killed. Rescue personnel inspected the train and the tracks, but strangely, the front of the train and the carriages showed no signs of impact. They then brought in professional equipment to lift the train and conduct a full inspection underneath. What they found was even more bizarre. The underside of the train was completely clean. Nothing was there. No blood, no damage, no trace of an accident at all.
The inspection lasted nearly an hour. After repeated checks, the incident was officially classified as a false alarm. The driver was placed on 2 days' leave. The train was sent back to the depot for further examination, and after a brief suspension, service resumed as normal. But several passengers who had been on the platform that day couldn't forget what they saw. They insisted they had clearly watched a white figure enter the tracks. How could a living person simply vanish? The unusual event was soon reported by the media, described in vivid detail. Not long after, a blurry piece of footage began circulating.
In the video, a vague white-clad figure appears, then, in the split second before the train enters the platform, seems to disappear from the platform edge. The image wasn't clear, but it quickly ignited intense public discussion. Even stranger, one of the witnesses, another female student, reportedly fell seriously ill just 2 days after the incident. According to her family and friends, she had been waiting on the platform at Yalmate and saw the white uniformed girl enter the tracks with her own eyes. But what terrified her was this: the girl's figure, hairstyle, even the white school uniform looked exactly like hers. She panicked and ran home. 2 days later, her mental state deteriorated severely, and her body also began showing alarming symptoms. Some people speculated that the mysterious girl might have been connected to this witness in some way, and that connection led to her misfortune. Others offered a different explanation. They argued it may have been a case of collective false memory. When a group of people are tense, frightened, and emotionally stirred, they can be easily influenced by the reactions and claims of those around them, until imagined events feel real.
So, did the white uniform girl at Yalmate Station really exist?
37 years later, in 2019, writer Feng Hagon brought up the incident in an online article and unexpectedly received letters from 2 people claiming insider knowledge. They said they knew the woman in white. According to them, she wasn't a student at all. She was 22 years old at the time and suffered from bipolar disorder. They claimed that on that day, she really did end up in a dangerous situation, but at the very last moment, before the train arrived, she managed to squeeze into a gap below, surviving by sheer luck. In the confusion afterward, she quietly climbed back onto the platform and left on her own. They said she is now around 60 years old, living a peaceful life. But doubts followed immediately, because based on the footage that circulated, a figure seems to appear only an instant before the train arrives. In such a tiny window of time, could anyone really hide in a gap below the platform fast enough?
Whether she truly existed, or what really happened that day, remains unanswered, even now.
The MTR train continues on its way, slowly pulling out of Yalmate and gliding through the underground tunnel. 2 stops later, we arrive at another place filled with mystery: Prince Edward Station. Many people have heard of something called walking in circles, sometimes described as a supernatural loop. In ancient times, travelers would move through the darkness, convinced they were heading forward, only to realize they had somehow looped around and returned to the exact same spot. It felt as if an invisible wall had trapped them in place, no matter how hard they tried to escape. Unable to explain what was happening, people attributed it to unseen forces. And that's how the legend of the supernatural loop was born. But in modern-day Hong Kong, an advanced, fast-moving city, people claim something eerily similar has happened. Like Yalmate, Prince Edward is also an interchange station between the Tsuen Wan line and the Kwanton line. The crowds never stop. It's busy, noisy, and constantly in motion. Prince Edward Station officially opened in the 1980s. Back then, Yalmate was the terminus of the Kwanton line, and the story of Prince Edward begins with something as ordinary as an MTR announcement. One passenger boarded a train at Shamshui-Po, heading toward Yalmate, planning to transfer at Prince Edward. At 10:02 p.m., the train arrived at Prince Edward Station. He got off and walked to the opposite platform. Before long, another train pulled in, and he stepped on without a second thought. The doors closed. The train departed. Everything seemed normal, but then the onboard announcement played, and he froze. At first, he thought he'd misheard, so he looked up at the route map above the doors, and to his shock, it still showed the train heading toward Prince Edward Station. A few minutes later, the doors opened. He got off and realized he was still at Prince Edward. Not just any Prince Edward. He was back at the very same station he had just left.
Confused and unsettled, he scanned his surroundings. Everything matched. The signs, the layout, the platform. There was no doubt about it.
Feeling increasingly uneasy, he quickly left the platform. Later, he posted about the incident online. What he didn't expect was the response. Dozens of people replied, claiming they had experienced the exact same thing. Some believed they had briefly slipped into a parallel world at Prince Edward Station. Others said the train had become trapped in an endless loop, repeating the same journey over and over again. And slowly, the legend of Prince Edward began to spread.
One netizen shared an even stranger story. He said that one night, while taking the MTR to Sham Shui Po, as the train passed Prince Edward, several figures suddenly appeared inside the tunnel. He stared harder, and what he saw sent chills down his spine.
They looked like people dressed in old-style official robes, like something from a different era, and they were carrying a bright red bridal sedan chair, moving slowly through the dim tunnel, as if the train had passed into a scene from a century ago.
He also pointed out that more than 100 years ago, the area where Prince Edward Station stands today used to be a village. Of course, not everyone accepts a supernatural explanation. As the tale spread further, some people tried to make sense of it in a more practical way. One theory was that the loop was simply a scheduling issue. If service needed to be adjusted, perhaps the train was temporarily rerouted, making a quick loop so another train behind it could enter. Many found this convincing. Hong Kong's MTR runs at extremely high frequency, so temporary dispatch changes wouldn't be unusual. But a blogger challenged that explanation. He went out of his way to study the MTR track maps and pointed out a key detail. Prince Edward Station doesn't have a circular track that would allow a train to loop around and return to the same station.
So where did the loop come from? The blogger noticed something else. In the earliest post about the incident, the passenger wasn't describing a train that left Prince Edward and immediately returned. For a train to pass Prince Edward and then come back to it, the only realistic way would be to turn around at the terminus, Yau Ma Ti. In other words, the passenger may have boarded the train in the wrong direction during the transfer, accidentally getting on a train heading to Yau Ma Ti. Once it reached the end of the line, the train didn't clear all passengers. It simply reversed direction and headed back, and before he knew it, he ended up back at Prince Edward Station, completely confused. That may be the most reasonable explanation, but it still doesn't convince everyone, because more than one person has claimed to experience something similar. And to this day, the ghost loop legend of Prince Edward Station continues to circulate through Hong Kong's urban folklore. At this point, our MTR train departs Prince Edward Station and continues north along the Kwun Tong line. After a few stops, we arrive at the setting of the next story, Choi Hung Station. This station is truly distinctive. It's named for its rainbow-themed design. Bright, colorful, and instantly recognizable. One of the most iconic stations on the Kwun Tong line. But what makes it truly unusual isn't just the aesthetics. Choi Hung is the only station in Hong Kong with 3 railway tracks, and for reasons no one can clearly explain, the middle track has long been left unused, sealed off, almost abandoned. For years, a chilling rumor has circulated that this blocked middle track doesn't lead to another station at all, but to the gates of the Underworld. The story begins in October 1979, the very year Choi Hung Station first opened, and it was during those early days of operation that something strange allegedly happened. Let's look at the line map. Choi Hung sits between Diamond Hill and Kowloon Bay. That day, a train left Diamond Hill heading toward Kowloon Bay. Everything seemed normal before it passed Choi Hung. The distance between Choi Hung and Kowloon Bay is only 1.5 kilometers, a trip that usually takes about 3 minutes. But after the train departed Choi Hung, it suddenly went silent. Staff at Kowloon Bay waited and waited, but no signal came through. Over the communication system, they could only hear broken bursts of static. Shh, crackle, shh. They tried again and again to reach the train, but got no response. Then, out of the tunnel, the train finally appeared, eerily quiet.
Inside the driver's cab, the driver's expression was unnervingly strange, and no matter what anyone asked, he refused to say what had happened. The passengers were reportedly so badly shaken that some were taken to the hospital. It was said that a few of them were left with severe psychological trauma.
After the incident, the MTR reportedly invited a master to examine the station. When he looked at the middle track, he kept shaking his head. With a heavy sigh, he said the passage led to the Ghost Gate, a one-way threshold to the Underworld. It must never be used again, and it could not be dug out either. The best solution, he claimed, was to avoid it completely and build a new route elsewhere.
And later, the MTR really did add a new track arrangement at Choi Hung, while that mysterious middle track was left to decay in silence.
With media coverage, the legend spread wider and wider, sparking heated debate. Some believed it completely. Others suspected there was a more rational explanation. Some people even went digging through early MTR engineering records and found something interesting. The middle track was originally designed for train dispatching and scheduling. Back in the 1970s, the MTR had once planned a major extension. Starting from Diamond Hill on the Kwantong Line, the route would stretch southwest all the way to Sheungwan, cutting through the heart of the city and making travel far more convenient. But building a railway isn't just about laying tracks. You also need a large depot, a place to park and maintain trains. The problem was, the proposed extension ran through dense urban areas with almost no undeveloped land. The MTR couldn't find a site large enough to build a new depot. Then they noticed something. Near the next station, Kowloon Bay, there was already the Kowloon Bay Depot, newly completed at the time. It had multiple tracks and professional facilities for routine maintenance. So the plan became, build a middle track at Choi Hung, specifically to connect directly to the Kowloon Bay Depot.
But during construction, the grand plan to extend from Diamond Hill to Sheungwan was eventually cancelled. Even so, the middle track at Choi Hung remained in use for dispatching, so it wasn't truly abandoned at first. Passengers waiting at Choi Hung would occasionally see a train pass through that middle track.
It sounds like the truth is clear, and yet the urban legend never really died.
And what's even more fascinating is this. The MTR didn't seem bothered by the rumors. In fact, they even leaned into them. Before Halloween in 2016, the MTR posted a video on its official Facebook page. Shot in first-person view, it takes the viewer on a ride through a dark tunnel, entering Choi Hung Station via the mysterious middle track. The soundtrack was a string of unusual ding-ding chimes, and the post even included a warning-style hashtag, something like, "Not for the faint of heart." The eerie atmosphere was maxed out. Then, in 2024, during the MTR's 45th anniversary, the official team went even further, recreating the legend in real life. They organized a special commemorative event and invited the public to ride a replica of the original first-generation train. And this train did something very specific. It departed from the legendary middle track at Choi Hung Station and traveled directly to the... As soon as the announcement went out, the response was overwhelming. On the day of the event, the middle platform at Choi Hung was packed early. When the replica train arrived, the crowd erupted into cheers, phones raised high to capture the moment. The doors opened, and passengers surged into the cars, packing them full in seconds. Then the train rolled out along the forbidden middle track. Outside the windows was only darkness. In the air, there was a subtle mix of tension and anticipation. A few minutes later, as everyone held their breath, the train burst out of the tunnel and arrived at the Kowloon Bay Depot. These special passengers toured the facility and listened to retired staff talk about what daily work was like back in the early days. And that's the most interesting part of this story. The official MTR has never fully denied the legend and never confirmed it either.
Instead, it treats the tale with a tone that sits somewhere between seriousness and playful mystery, turning an urban legend into a uniquely Hong Kong memory, sealed into the rhythm of the city's rails. In the first 3 MTR legends, those stations are still in service today. But the next story is different, because the station we're about to talk about has never welcomed a single passenger. It was built in the early days of the MTR, fully equipped. Platforms, concourse, entrances, everything completed. And yet, it was never opened, never put into service.
This vanished station, missing from the map, is said to be called Whitty Station. It was originally planned for the western section of the Island Line, around Whitty Street, roughly near where HKU Station stands today. According to the legend, its platforms, station hall, and exits were all finished, but right before the line opened, the entire station was suddenly sealed off and abandoned.
So what could possibly happen so serious that a completed station would be locked away forever?
To understand the story, we have to start with a street nearby.
That street is called High Street, not far to the east of where Whitty Station was supposedly located. In the daytime, High Street looks ordinary, but at night, few people dare to get too close. Some residents say that when they have to pass through High Street late at night, they walk quickly in silence, almost as if they're afraid of disturbing something. The reason, they say, is that there once stood a well-known psychiatric hospital there, one that specifically housed female patients. Its surrounding walls were built from granite, standing heavy and gray by the roadside, giving the whole area an unsettling feeling. In the past, certain incidents were rumored to have happened there. Locals believe the place held many souls that never found peace. Some even nicknamed High Street Ghost Street. Over time, the legend spread, and the abandoned Whitty Station was said to be located not far from that hospital. When construction first began, some local residents allegedly warned the MTR company the area was full of dark rumors, and they should never dig into the ground, or something unusual might happen.
But no one took it seriously. Construction continued as planned.
By the late 1970s, work on Whitty Station was nearing completion. 2 entrances had already been built. The underground tracks, platforms, and station hall were almost finished. And that's when strange incidents reportedly began, one after another.
First, some workers claimed they suffered unexplained accidents inside the tunnel. People searched for causes, but found no signs of falling equipment or structural failure. Then, another worker said that around 11 p.m., deep inside the pitch-black tunnel, he began hearing strange sounds. Sometimes the noise was sharp and piercing. Other times it was low and heavy, an unsettling rhythm that made his skin crawl. At first, everyone thought it was imagination. But over the next few nights, more workers reported hearing the same thing, always around the same time. Unease spread through the crew. Some workers refused to continue. Others went on strike, and the project fell behind schedule.
To put an end to the rumors, an expatriate engineer decided to investigate personally. He didn't believe in any of it, so one night, he brought a few workers into the tunnel at 11 p.m. to check things out.
They walked with flashlights through the darkness. Then, in the distance, they saw something that stopped them cold. A woman in white, standing silently on the platform. The workers froze in shock. The engineer assumed someone was playing a prank. He shouted angrily and started walking toward her, trying to stop whoever it was. But the woman didn't even look at them. And then, right in front of everyone, she vanished into thin air. No footsteps, no movement, no trace on the tracks. Nothing. The engineer was shaken. He rushed back and reported the incident to the company. The next day, the MTR urgently halted all work at Whitty Station and sealed off the platform with barricades. But according to the legend, it still wasn't over. After that night,
People claimed that every evening at 11 p.m., the same woman would appear, not at the abandoned station, but on platforms at nearby stations. News spread, fear grew, and the public began to panic. The MTR company eventually brought in a spiritual master in hopes of stopping whatever was happening.
After inspecting the area, the master reportedly concluded that what they had seen was not ordinary. He believed the district carried some kind of lingering energy, and that construction should not continue.
And just like that, Whitty Station was abandoned forever.
But is any of this true? Some people who researched old records found that Whitty Station was indeed rumored to have two entrances, said to be located near Chuangye Commercial Center and Pacific Plaza, and they argue that the real reason for its abandonment wasn't supernatural at all.
It was simply because the route was later changed, and instead of opening Whitty Station, the MTR ultimately built HKU Station further south.
And because the entrances had already been constructed as part of an MTR station, regulations meant they could only be used as station infrastructure, not converted for other purposes.
So the station was sealed and left to fade into silence.
In fact, Hong Kong has more than a few similar, unused entrances, passageways that were once part of the city's grand development plans, but later forgotten.
The final story didn't happen inside an MTR station, but it's still closely connected to Hong Kong's railways. It all began with an old advertisement. Before we officially dive into this case, let's first take a look at the ad itself.
This was a promotional commercial released in 1991 by the Kowloon Canton Railway Corporation, also known as KCR. Years later, KCR merged with Hong Kong's MTR system, and the network became what we now know as the MTR.
The commercial is only 40 seconds long. In it, several children are playing a train game in the woods, each child holding the shoulders of the one in front, moving forward like a little human locomotive. At the end, the text on screen reads,
"In our memories, trains are always wonderful. In reality, we do everything we can to keep your laughter going."
But here's the strange part.
The ad's color palette is gray and dim, with low saturation. The music is slow and heavy, almost gloomy. The kids are dressed in old-fashioned clothing, surrounded by wild, barren woodland. Most viewers didn't feel any laughter at all. Instead, the whole thing left an oddly oppressive impression.
Not long after it aired, sharp-eyed viewers began to notice something unsettling.
In different shots, the number of children didn't seem to match. And in one close-up, a child appeared to have a dark stain or mark near the corner of their mouth, something that looked wrong.
So, was it real? Let's go through the commercial again. At the very beginning, you hear a long, drawn-out train whistle. Then the camera slowly pans to the right, focusing on the children's legs as they line up in the woods, playing their train game.
Pause here and count them. There are 6 children in total. At the very end of the line is a boy wearing long pants. Then the camera cuts to a view from the front of the line. At the very front is a little boy wearing a cap and a plaid shirt. Second in line is a girl with braided hair wearing a blue outfit. And if you look closely, there does appear to be a long dark mark near the right corner of her mouth. A moment later, the camera switches again, this time to a straight-on front view. The children overlap and stack together visually, And if you're not paying attention, it becomes hard to tell how many there are.
Pause again, because now it's not just 6 anymore. In this shot, at the back of the line, there is a girl with braided hair, someone who never appears in any of the other scenes.
And then, in the final moment of the commercial, as the children walk away into the distance, the lineup changes again. Now, the last child is a boy wearing a cap and short overalls.
But earlier, the last child was clearly a boy in long pants. They're obviously not the same person. That inconsistency is what transformed this 40-second commercial into one of Hong Kong's most famous urban legends. The story even traveled overseas, eventually appearing on a Japanese variety show and sparking intense debate. Later, more rumors began to circulate. Some claimed that the child actors in the ad went on to experience a string of misfortunes. Others went even further, saying that the boy at the very front of the train later suffered a real-life train accident.
And from there, the legend only grew darker.
As the controversy grew larger and larger, the advertising agency behind the commercial eventually had to respond publicly. According to the agency, the original goal of the ad was to support KCR's modernization campaign and capture attention in a more distinctive way. To make the commercial more memorable, the team chose not to film actual trains or railway tracks. Instead, they used a nostalgic concept, children playing a train game, to evoke the warmth of childhood memories. In the earliest version of the concept, the commercial was supposed to include a more complex storyline. But with only 40 seconds to work with, the team worried that a complicated plot would overwhelm viewers. In the end, they decided to remove the story entirely and keep only the core imagery of the children playing the train game, delivering emotion in the simplest, most direct way. As for why the children were dressed in old-fashioned clothing and why the ad was shot in a forest, the agency explained that it was a creative decision by the director. He believed period-style outfits would give the visuals a stronger sense of time and create a romantic atmosphere, something detached from everyday reality. The filming location was set in Beijing because the natural environment there was more open and expansive and would feel fresh and unfamiliar to Hong Kong audiences. The child actors also came from a kindergarten in Beijing. And because the filming site was relatively remote and the children were very young, the production team prepared 20 kids in total, letting them take turns playing the train game in the woods. After filming, the editors selected the most natural-looking shots from different takes and stitched them together into the final cut. That, they said, is why the number of children appears to change between scenes. As for the strange mark viewers noticed at the corner of one girl's mouth, the agency confirmed it was simply a shadow formed by her facial expression as she smiled. Due to the low video quality, muted saturation, and the angle of lighting, it created the illusion of something suspicious. And the final rumor, that one of the child actors later died in a train accident, was, according to them, completely baseless. Because the rumor had caused genuine public anxiety, KCR made a point of clearing things up. They invited several media outlets to revisit the original filming location, and they also worked to track down every child actor who had participated in the commercial. The company even held a small reunion gathering. Many of the children, now grown, appeared in person, confirming that the rumors were nothing more than fiction. Some media outlets went even further. To verify everything, they contacted one of the actors who had been rumored to have died. Without revealing their real purpose, they requested an interview under the excuse of discussing the old commercial. The person agreed immediately and showed up as scheduled, effortlessly disproving the death rumor on the spot. In the end, it became clear. Most of these long circulating mysteries were simply misunderstandings, exaggerations, and imagination. But strangely enough, it was precisely these hard-to-verify details, these tiny inconsistencies, that made an otherwise ordinary ad replayed, dissected, and debated again and again, until it gradually became one of Hong Kong's most famous commercials.
The MTR and the rail system that came before it is deeply woven into everyday life in Hong Kong. Whether these urban legends are true or not may not even matter anymore.
What matters is that they've become part of the city's unique culture.
The trains still run every day, and the stories surrounding them will continue to be told.